The chef has prepared a terrifying feast that will satisfy the toughest critics. If you enjoy the best, only the best, hit the like and subscribe and devour that bell icon to get the best seat in the house when the chef has prepared a new dish of terrifying true stories. Now, take a seat. Dinner is served. About a year ago, I was taking a life-saving class at a pool near me, which we usually ended up leaving at around 9:15 p.m. A lot of the girls left really early that night, so it was just me and one other girl there until the end. After class, I headed to the locker room. Immediately upon entering, you would be in a narrow mini hallway directly in front of a cubicle. If you turned right, facing the cubicle, you would enter an open space with lockers and benches that curved away, and the space would close a little and split into showers and bathroom stalls. I was changing, facing the left side lockers so that I could directly see the bathroom stalls but not the showers because of the dividing wall where the shower heads hung. My friend was in the cubicle and neither of us was talking. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a blurry figure that looked strangely like her pass me and go toward the stalls. I chalked it up to my eyes playing tricks on me. A few moments later, my friend exited the locker room and I heard her stop, so I turned around and did a double take. More on that later. She said, "You're still here? I thought you left." I looked at her in surprise and told her that I never left. She then told me that she saw feet under the cubicle and heard the locker room door open and close. It was a very loud, creaky, and slow door, so she thought I was gone. I then told her about the shadow that I saw too. Here's the weirdest part though. As I mentioned, I did a double take because the thing I saw was wearing exactly the same clothes that she had changed into, a light pink t-shirt and black leggings. Not only that, but she typically left her hair down after changing, but this time she had tied it up into a high ponytail, just like the shadow thing I'd seen. Keep in mind that there was no way I could have seen her clothes beforehand, as she kept them in her backpack, and I distinctly remember that her hair was not tied when she entered the cubicle. We both stood there, freaked out, before I said out loud, "Is anyone there?" The light directly above the cubicle and another one above the nearest bathroom stall both flickered a little. We dashed so fast out of there, practically slamming the door shut. The incident is definitely still on my mind sometimes because neither one of us had any explanation for what happened. I haven't had the chance to return, but I'm curious to see if I have another weird experience there again. When I was 12, a teacher asked two of my friends and me to go to the school gymnasium to get something. It was located at the end of the school where there were no classrooms. The gym was not being used at the time either. When we arrived at the double doors, two of us opened them simultaneously. The gym was pitch black as the only window was high up near the ceiling, on the wall to our left. The window was also covered with a thick blue curtain, so no light came through. But there on ground level was a white, glowing figure standing at the back of the gym directly. We all saw it immediately, immediately screamed, and ran back to class. We told the teacher what we saw, and he came with us to investigate. When we got there, the figure was gone. The teacher insisted it was the light from the window, but even if the light did penetrate through the curtains, it would have shone onto the middle or right side of the gym. There was no way light would have reached the corner that the figure had stood in. Both my friends and I were certain of what we saw, even though we didn't know what it was. Still creeps me out to this day. When I was 19, my mom passed away from cancer. I was a couple of weeks pregnant, but I wasn't aware at the time. When she got sick, we got her a new recliner that was big and comfy and only for her. After she passed, I got married and moved out. I took her recliner with me. A few months later, I got up for one of my many trips to pee at night. There she was, sitting in the recliner. Her hair had grown back, and she was wearing her favorite outfit. I was shocked, but all I could get out was a hello. I stood and talked to her for a while. She told me that I was having a girl, and she was supposed to be born in June, but wouldn't be here until July. She told me I wasn't going to stay with him, my then husband, who at that time was cheating on me and I didn't know, as well as a few other things. Everything she told me actually happened. Every single thing. My due date was June 29. My daughter was born on July 5th. I ended up moving back home when my daughter was 2 because my ex couldn't be faithful if he wanted to. When I walked in the door, the first thing my dad said to me was, "Your mother said she's happy you're home." I chalked that up to his depression because he was struggling with her loss. He took all her pictures down and kept them in the back of the closet because he couldn't handle looking at them. It was as if she was never there, but you could still feel her there. Dad worked the night shift, 4 to midnight, so on this particular night, my daughter was sleeping. Since it was just the two of us there, I took a bath, but left the door open so I could hear if she got up. I heard the sound of someone on the back porch, but knew it wasn't Dad, as he wouldn't be home for a few more hours. I was expecting a knock or even the door to open because our house was older and you could hear almost every movement. I started to hear footsteps in the dining room, but the door never opened. Then they were in the living room. Then they started making their way down the hallway toward the bathroom. Out of panic or stupidity, I'm not sure which, I yelled out, "I don't care who you are, but I don't want to see or hear you." Immediately, the footsteps stopped. About 2 minutes later, I heard my daughter laughing and talking to someone. "Hi, Grandma, you're back to play with me," she said. I didn't move for a long time. It wasn't until I heard her say, "Bye, Grandma," that I had the guts to go check on her. I know I'm terrible, but I was terrified for some reason. Every so often after that, I would hear her laughing and talking by herself. I'd ask her what she was doing, and she'd always say she was playing with Grandma. Do I believe her? I do. One day, she came out to the dining room to tell me that Grandma was very happy that I named her after her. None of us had told her that because it was over a year before I could call her by her name. It had to have been my mom. When she was 3, I got a bunch of family pictures out and set them on the table. I called her in and told her we were going to look at pictures. I was about to start going through them with her when she looked and yelled, "There's Grandma!" Sure enough, she picked the one picture I had chosen of my mother to put out. She was with 2 of her sisters in that picture, but my daughter pointed right at her. There was a lot more that happened like that in that house, and almost 20 years later, Sharon, my daughter, will still ask me if I remember when she would talk to Grandma. I doubt either of us will ever forget, but I'm happy they actually got to meet. When I moved back home, her room became my daughter's playroom, and I know she would have wanted it that way. I miss that house, and if I ever get the chance to buy it again, I will in a heartbeat. My best friend and I were both avowed practical jokers and would do all sorts of things to scare each other or place the other in hilarious situations. One particularly funny incident was when I sneaked into his apartment building before he came home from work, unscrewed all the light bulbs in the hallway so that everything was pitch black, then waited for him to come home. When he got to his apartment door, I grabbed his leg and he screamed like a soprano on helium. My friend suddenly became very ill in late 1998 from progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy, an AIDS-related illness. Despite his wishes to come to stay with me during his final days, his strict mother forced him to stay at his parents' home in coastal South Carolina. His condition got worse. Although I had made several trips to see him, I had to travel for work one weekend instead of going to spend time with him. I was exhausted after I returned home to Atlanta, so I went to bed. At approximately 6 in the morning, I woke up feeling as if my entire body was being electrocuted, as if an intense current was passing through me. I stood up on top of my bed, took a few steps, then proceeded to fall face first over the footboard, onto the floor. I landed in a tangle. I picked myself up and went back to sleep. When I woke up a few hours later, I checked my voicemail, and there was a message from his father. He had passed away at approximately 6 that morning. All these years later, I have had the conviction that he had to pull one last practical joke on me as he exited this world, and shocking me and causing me to collapse in a heap on the floor was his way of doing it. My wife, my mother in law, and I bought a piece of land together. My mother in law bought a repo trailer for us to live in. When she took us to the lot to look at it, I immediately didn't like it. I wasn't a believer in the paranormal or sensitive by any means, but it seemed like there was a dark energy in the place. One night, a while after we and my wife's teenage daughter started living in the trailer, things got strange. We were all in the living room watching TV, and a book flew off of the bookshelf into the middle of the living room floor. I replaced the book, and a couple of minutes later, a chair fell over in the kitchen for no apparent reason. I set the chair back up and went back to watching TV. A couple of minutes later, the hairdryer in her bathroom turned itself on. My wife went in and turned it off. It was bizarre. Several months later, my wife and I had separated, and I moved elsewhere. One evening, I got a phone call from her. She was alone, scared to death, and wanted me to come over. When I got there, I asked what had scared her so badly, and she told me to go into the bathroom and take a look. There, on the mirror, was a pentagram. After all our experiences in that trailer, I no longer doubt that there are things beyond our understanding. I was sleeping upstairs in my bed on a hot summer evening, having been asleep for several hours. My brother's room was directly across a small landing, maybe 15 feet away. Suddenly, I awoke, feeling like I was being watched. I chastised myself for being childish and cajoled myself to open my eyes to prove there was no one staring at me in my doorway. I counted down 1, 2, 3, opened my eyes, and turned to the door to prove to myself that no one was there. Well, there was a figure standing there. It was a shadow man as tall as the doorway itself. Its form consisted of a shadow that was darker than the night around it. I closed my eyes immediately, trying to figure out what to do. Did I really just see what I thought I did? I turned onto my stomach and pulled my foot back under the covers. I could still feel it staring at me. I hoped it would stay at the doorway or fade away. No such luck. Gradually, I could feel the air start to turn cool. At the same time, I could feel its presence getting closer and closer. I was so frightened. The next thing I knew, I felt a cold, evil weight lying on top of my back. The weight felt like when magnets repel each other, like an invisible force of sorts. It seemed to be trying to push down into me. It was very cold. I was entirely petrified and thought I should call out for help. My parents' room was directly below mine, and my brother was sleeping just across the landing. I built up the courage to scream and counted in my mind again. 1, 2, 3, and I screamed like I had never screamed before. But to my horror, no sound came out. To make matters even worse, the shadow figure moved its hand toward my open mouth. Its shadow hand was entering my mouth and attempting to grab my voice or something. I don't know. I was terrified. I stopped screaming, and its hand faded from inside my mouth and throat. I could still feel the cold. I could still feel the heaviness of its form on my body. I could still feel its evil. I didn't know what to do next, so I decided to start praying. After what seemed like forever, I could feel the weight lifting and the air warming. Eventually, I didn't feel its presence anymore. I couldn't bring myself to run downstairs to get help from my parents or even across the landing to my brother's room, so I stayed there, horrified. Once morning began to dawn, I fell asleep. I have feared this apparition returning my entire life. I think it may have been tied to that farmhouse we lived in since it was quite old. I always felt an evil presence from that side of my room. So scary. Let's just say it's not hard for me to believe in heaven and hell now. About 15 years ago, my husband and I lived in an apartment, our first place together. Our work schedules meant we often slept at different times, leaving me alone in the apartment at night. One peculiar occurrence started with my cell phone randomly lighting up by itself when I was home, as if someone was turning it on. It happened repeatedly, but I dismissed it as a glitch. One night, returning from the basement laundry room, I found the chandelier above the kitchen table swaying vigorously. There were no open windows or other logical explanations, so I had to physically intervene to stop it. Despite finding this unsettling, I kept it to myself, not wanting my husband to think I was imagining things. A few nights later, while I was sleeping, my husband burst into the room alarmed, asking if I was okay. He had heard a loud bang and thought I had fallen. Investigating together, we discovered the spare bedroom door had slammed shut. Oddly, our carpeted floor made it impossible to slam the door in such a manner, even when we tried to recreate it. The strangest incident came later when I woke in the middle of the night, unable to move, a classic case of sleep paralysis. Beside me, I saw a dark, featureless figure standing by my side of the bed. It was a terrifying experience, and I could only hope it would disappear if I closed my eyes. When I finally woke up normally, I recounted everything to my husband, shaken to my core. Discussing this with my brother, he identified it as a shadow person and suggested I look it up. Terrified, I did, and the description matched exactly what I had seen. These experiences left us deeply unsettled, and shortly after, we moved to a new house where nothing similar ever occurred again. Despite leaving that apartment behind, the memories of those nights still haunt me. I was newly divorced at 28 years old, raising my two young kids, a 5-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy, in our new house. It didn't take long for strange occurrences to begin. One night, while tucking my daughter into bed, she casually mentioned Peggy, a pink triangle that floated around her room. This puzzled me, as Peggy was also a common nickname for Margaret, the name of the previous owner whom my daughter couldn't possibly have known. Things took a darker turn when my daughter mentioned a dark figure with a hat that repeatedly demanded Peggy to come with him. This was unsettling enough, but soon my son began experiencing his own disturbances, his sheets and blankets being violently ripped off by an unseen force each night. One terrifying night, I found myself held down in my bed, as if someone heavy was lying on top of me. It lasted for what felt like an eternity before finally releasing its grip. We also heard voices and noises we couldn't explain, and occasionally saw figures that vanished upon closer inspection. Seeking answers, I spoke with older neighbors who had lived in the area for decades. They revealed a chilling history. The previous occupants, Margaret and her mother, Margaret, endured severe physical abuse from the husband, who was eventually jailed. Even after their divorce, he would scream outside the house at all hours, demanding Margaret to come with him. This revelation shed light on the disturbing events in our home. While we continued to experience oddities over the years, nothing matched the intensity of those initial months. The house seemed to hold on to its past, manifesting its history in eerie and unsettling ways. About 5 years ago, my family and I built a house on a large lot that included a significant portion of forested area. During our explorations of the property, we stumbled upon 5 weathered limestone headstones that were unmarked. Initially, we found them intriguing, but didn't think much of them. As we researched the area's history, we discovered that our house was situated very close to what had been a farm in the 1850s. Curious about the potential historical connection, we decided to conduct an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, session. We recorded ourselves asking questions and listened for responses, requesting 2 clicks for yes and 1 click for no. To our surprise, we received 2 distinct clicking sounds in direct response to several questions, particularly when we asked if they were part of the family that first settled in the area. After this initial interaction, strange occurrences began happening. One night, my wife felt her foot being pulled while we were asleep. She woke me up immediately, and despite searching the entire house from basement to top floor, we found nothing amiss. My own unsettling experience occurred while I was sleeping in a basement room. It was early morning, and although I had just woken up, I wasn't ready to get out of bed yet. With my eyes closed, I suddenly felt someone's cheek brushing against mine, accompanied by a quiet whisper in my ear saying, "Wake." The door to the room was closed, and I was alone in the house as everyone else was still asleep. Despite these eerie encounters, we've chosen to live with the activity and accept it as part of our home's history. We remain curious yet cautious about what the future holds for us in this unique and possibly haunted location. Before my husband and I were married, we lived together in a tiny studio apartment housed within an old 1930s building. One night, both being avid horror fans, we decided to dive into the show American Horror Story for the first time. We ended up binge watching half of the first season, staying up late until around 2 a.m. By the time we went to bed, we were thoroughly spooked, but in a good way. However, about 2 hours later, we were abruptly awakened by the jarring sound of loud TV static. It startled me, especially since our TV was the type that automatically muted itself when encountering static. You had to actively turn up the volume to hear any static noise. I hurried out of bed to switch it off, and as I approached the TV, I noticed something unsettling. The door to our apartment was wide open. Living in a studio meant our bedroom door opened directly into the building's main hallway. I don't subscribe to beliefs in the supernatural, but faced with the options of something paranormal or an unknown intruder entering our home to turn on the TV while we slept, I almost wished for the former. We hadn't met anyone else in the building, making it unlikely it was a prank by someone we knew. What baffled me most was how swiftly the intruder could have vanished. We woke up the instant the static began, and if it was a person, we should have seen them fleeing. Yet, upon searching our apartment thoroughly, we found no one. It remains a mystery, one of those strange occurrences that defies logical explanation. As much as I prefer rationality over paranormal theories, that night left us with an unsettling feeling about the unknown forces that may or may not have been at play in our little studio apartment. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and devour the bell icon. If you have a story you would like to share, send it to creepychefmedia@gmail.com.